So I'm Andrew Culberson. So I work for the Department of Education, Early Childhood Development in New Brunswick. So I've been there, I'm going into my third year there, seconded, but in my previous career path, I was a guidance counselor at some of the large high schools here in Fredericton. I'm a big advocate of social emotional learning and a big advocate of mental health. That's kind of where I worked through my career. And so I've had the opportunity to really explore those in my work at the department. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's applicable education beyond. So I call it, it's really cradle to grave stuff. So whether it's little people or people that are not in the school system. And we'll keep it interactive. If you have questions, like I said, go ahead and ask. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and we're going to get started. All right, one more joining us. Okay. All right, so should be sharing the screen. You should see that now. And oh, I may have to just stop here because it's not letting me admit somebody. There we go. Okay. Okay, we're good. Okay. Wow. Okay, there we go. All right. So promoting positive mental health by exploring our purpose. So this is something that is very real, because when we're talking about exploring our purpose, there are so many different aspects of the individual. And so one of the, sorry, just admitting a couple of people that booted. So one of the pieces, when we talk about exploring our purpose, part of that is like a lot of the work that I do is even around career development. But as I started to work in career development, we're not going to discuss this now because I'm going to try to respect time as much as possible. We have some questions near the end, but we're going to take a look at the difference between mental health and mental illness, which we've already heard a little bit about that already through this conference. And so hopefully we'll paint a picture that's going to help you kind of delineate the two of those, so mental health and mental illness, and the difference between coping and hoping. And so when we're trying to find purpose, it's really that idea that I can now, I can tomorrow, I can in the future. And so we want to help try to provide people a level of hope. I just want to share this video. Let me know if you can't hear it.
I can't hear anything.
There's no sound in, Andrew.
Oh, okay.
It's because you have your headset in, I think.
I think if you disconnect your AirPods, it'll work.
Is that working now? You know what? We're gonna skip through the videos, I think, right now anyway.
It does work when you take your...
When I take my headset off? Okay, good to know. I don't want to waste time on that stuff. Just one sec here. I just gotta stop sharing just for a minute. I stuff in and out and froze. All right. Apologize for the hiccups. Okay, there we go. Oh, technology. What would we do without you, technology? So we're going to take a look at some of the data just around mental health, and how the idea of providing hope and finding purpose is going to help us be able to cope now and in the future. And so we're going to look at how do we help develop those opportunities for our students. And a lot of this is through experiential learning. So one of the things we're talking about, like helping young people develop
a sense of
Cool. Concept. Helping young people develop a sense of hope. It's about helping them become future ready. So helping them understand what are the skills and competencies that they're going to need to help carry them forward, navigate a world that they don't know. And this becomes especially like relevant and prevalent now in COVID times, as we work towards, you know, a sense of like healing and where do I fit. But also we've seen the decline of mental health through all of this, and how do we support each other, and how do we support our young people and old. But part of that, it is that developing a sense of hope. So making the case. So why is mental health part of the equation when we're talking about developing hope? Well, when we're talking about mental health, it's that the state of psychological and emotional well-being. So it's a big piece of us, but it doesn't define who we are. So when we look at mental health problems and the cost, you know, so Reuters quotes this as 16 trillion by 2030, the global cost of not dealing with mental health problems. So this is not unique to young or old. This is across the board. So 2014, 46% of teachers report high daily stress during the school year. It's interesting though, we look at like what's the most common.
Good afternoon, it's Anita Boyle returning your call.
Oh, if you have your mic not muted, if you don't mind muting your mic. Thank you. It's interesting that before COVID, the most commonly felt emotion was anxiety or stress. And now it's anxiety or stress. Like it's still the same thing. I'm just going to mute Anita there. Okay, thanks. So anxiety or stress is a huge, this is not just with education, this is across the board. And so that affects our ability to function in the workplace. It affects our ability to have hope. So when we're looking at mental health and mental illness, we have to understand that like they're not interchangeable. They're two different aspects of our individual. And so as we kind of break those apart, when we look at mental illness in particular, that's the reduced ability to function over a prolonged period of time. So it actually affects our ability, mental illness can affect our ability to cope. So it can result in like distress, changes in our behavior, our thinking patterns. We can have feelings of loneliness or isolation because of mental illness. We can be disconnected, alienated. So when we break that apart, like why do people struggle with mental illness? There's a lot of different reasons. You know, there could be the biological, the genetics. It could be personality traits. It could be our environment, but it's often a combination of all of these pieces. And so investing in an understanding of what mental illness is part of the puzzle. And so understanding mental illness and destigmatizing. But that's not where we need to stop, because we need to go further than that. So what are some of the roots? Like what are causing people anxiety? So there's lots of things. It could be, you know, climate and changing climate. It could be work or an uncertain future. It could be money, economics, socioeconomics, education, fear of technology and it not working, right? That was my fear. What if stuff doesn't work? Anyway, but you learn to cope with things, right? Like you solve problems. And so developing skills to overcome those. So undiagnosed mental illness, almost 1/2, 49% of those who feel they have suffered from depression or anxiety have never gone to see a doctor. Suicide accounts for 24% of all deaths among 15 to 24-year-olds. Anxiety disorders affect 5% of the household population. Stigma or discrimination attached to mental illness presents a serious barrier, not only to diagnosis and treatment, but also to acceptance in the community. By age 40, about 50% of the population will have or have had a mental illness. Any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health problem or illness. 8% of adults will experience major depression at some time in their lives. Mental illness can be treated. But we have to have a solid understanding and separate mental illness from mental health. So taking a look at Corey Key's model of mental health and mental illness can really help us get to the place where we can see someone flourishing that may struggle with mental illness, but it's not talking about it on a linear spectrum anymore. So it's not like I have mental illness or my mental health is positive. So if we separate the two, I can have high mental illness or low mental illness. So we see that along the x-axis. But I can have low mental health or I can have high mental health. So I could actually be struggling with mental illness and I could have a really positive mental health. If I have a positive mental health, I'm going to be in the place that I can flourish. I'm going to be able to see myself in different situations and be successful and be able to navigate those. Now, I'm going to really struggle if I have a low mental health, whether I have low or high mental illness, I'm going to struggle. So the mental health piece is something that I don't have to be a doctor to help somebody work in that area of developing positive mental health. So there are many practitioners that can help with that. And it's important to work within your realm of comfort and skills. But encouraging the people in our workplace and promoting a positive mental health and how to develop that is really going to help move us forward in helping those around us flourish.
Andrew, may I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. So mental health is more environmental and mental illness is actually, and I could be so incorrect with using this word, but the disease?
Yeah, well, so yeah, like mental illness that's going to be part of our basically our biology, like that. So a mental illness is something that is going to be diagnosed. It's going to be something that is potentially treatable, which most mental illness, there is a treatment, whether it is medication or it's therapeutic or a combination of both. But when we're talking about developing that positive mental health, you're right. Like there's more of the environmental effects and the things that we can choose to do that are going to actually promote a positive mental health. Like for instance, working as a counselor, I mean, I work a lot around the idea of promoting positive mental health. I'm not in the position to diagnose anybody. And if somebody comes in and is worried that they may have a mental illness, then I refer them to that psychologist or the doctor so that they can be diagnosed. But also, and I know that those psychologists and doctors, they may promote positive mental health as well. But in a building of 150 people, my role as well to help young people develop positive mental health, but also to help the other people around them also promote positive mental health, because they can. Like whether you're in a classroom or you're in a workplace, promoting positive mental health can actually improve conditions for everybody. And everybody has a role to play in that, if that makes sense. So yes, I think you're right on, more to do with the environment and the choices that we're making as opposed to a hand that I may have been dealt, right?
Thank you for that.
That's a great question. So what are some of the things that we're able to do, right? So when we're talking about finding purpose and cultivating a positive mental health in the places around us, well, when we're talking in the school system, K to 12, and even beyond, we did a lot of research. So when I began work in career development, we did a lot of research around, how do we really move this to the place where we're helping young people figure out what's next? Like, what's my next step? And so the whole, developing a sense of hope and actually improving the mental health, that piece came after, as this is the result. Like, if we're doing this stuff well, this is what's going to be happening. But so some of the best practices that we came up with are social emotional learning, global competencies. And so those are going to be skills and competencies that I need to develop to be successful in any situations that I have not experienced yet.
How to turn on the Zoom link.
Oh, I'm just going to mute you, Rachel. That's okay. I lose my mouse when I go in here. So 1 sec, I just got to exit here. There we go. And back. Okay. So social emotional learning, global competencies. Engaging in experiential learning is going to really improve my self-efficacy. We're going to unpack that briefly as well. As dry as it may be, connections to the labor market. So this actually helps provide a level of hope and understanding of like what's out there. Where do I see myself? Creating a level of financial wellness and understanding of what money is and what we do with it. And then I have myBlueprint there. That's a tool that we use throughout Atlantic Canada to create e-portfolios and to do different career-based assessments. But it's a way of actually, we use that as a way of tracking all of this in a way to develop an online presence, but an online presence that's not Facebook or Instagram, but focused around my purpose. And we're going to skip through the videos right now, just because I feel we're going to gain more by having conversations after. So SEL, so social and emotional learning. So I love this quote: promotion of social, emotional, and academic learning is not a shifting educational fad. It's the substance of education itself. I would actually argue that it goes beyond education. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's not a distraction from the real work of math and English instruction. It's how instruction can succeed. Brings together traditionally conservative emphasis on local control, on the character of all students, and a historically progressive emphasis on the creative and challenging art of teaching and the social emotional needs of all students, especially those who've experienced the greatest challenges. This is from a report titled From a Nation at Risk to a Nation at Hope from 2019 from the Aspen Institute. They did a wonderful job pulling together research around social emotional learning and global competencies and the importance of those in our system to develop young people that have hope. So they're able to navigate the now, but also the later, the unknown. And so when we unpack, so this is from Castle. This is what I've attached myself to when I'm talking about social and emotional learning, because not everyone's necessarily clear. But one of the pieces around social emotional learning is being intentional, and it's using the proper language, and that will help empower those around us. I want to start on the outside of the circle and work my way in, because when we look at social emotional learning, We're talking about the individual, but on the outside, we have homes and communities. And this is why we're here at ASI this year too. This is, I mean, and most years, this is what we're talking about. It's beyond, right? That SEL needs to happen in schools, needs to happen in classrooms, but ultimately it's about me. It's my internal mechanism. It's how I'm functioning. It's how I'm preparing myself to learn. It's how I'm preparing myself to be a human that is contributing to the world around me in a proactive, pro-social way. So it's self-awareness and self-management, social awareness and relationship skills, and ultimately making good decisions, responsible decisions. This helps me actually prepare to be future ready. So there's a lot of learning that we start, I mean, it starts before school when we start developing all of these skills. It starts in the home. But part of the issue is that this is a bigger movement because those at home need to be aware. And so we need to be doing a better job of promoting these skills, which ultimately we're promoting relationship skills. We're promoting those values that young people, adults, need to be successful in life, to navigate, you know, all of those relationships and themselves. So the Durlak meta-analysis from 2011, 213 studies, 270,000 students. And what did they find? Like, if I'm engaging in social emotional learning in my place of work, I see an increased performance, more pro-social and SEL skills, better attitudes, less behavior problems, less emotional distress. I'm actually improving. If I'm focusing on SEL, I'm improving mental health of those around me. So by focusing on self-awareness, self-management, relationship skills, good decision-making, social awareness, I'm helping reduce an emotional distress because I understand myself and the people around me better. I understand the importance of relationships and how to manage those in a healthy way. So that the Durlak study was based on schools. When we look at brackets research, lower anxiety, lower depression, less stress, less burnout, when we're connected to high emotional intelligence or SEL. And if that's happening in the workplace, I'm going to perform better and I'm going to have leadership ability. And I'm going to be at work more, which, I mean, and now, like through COVID, that looks totally different. And so we have a role to be even more intentional now. It's more on the forefront, and we need to be attuned. And it's not just one, but it's many. So I talked about there's different skills that we're going to need, but also those global competencies. So I look at them as kind of two pieces. So the social emotional competencies, as you see in the blue in this diagram, those are more like, that's how I feel, that's how I interact with people around me. And those are going to really help provide that engagement with the global competencies. These are New Brunswick's global competencies. They're based on CMEX global competencies. And they're very similar, but the ideas of collaboration, communication, self-awareness, self-management, critical thinking, problem solving, sustainability, global citizenship, like this is the do. This is like, I'm going to activate these core skills and values, and I'm going to be doing things with them. I mean, that's transformational when we're not just taking this information in and learning it, but I'm going to take it, I'm going to apply it. And so the global competencies become a really key piece to helping provide that level of hope that I'm going to be able to do different things. I have different skills, and this is part of who I am. But we don't stop developing these cradle to grave, right? Like we continue to develop. And so the next really important piece of the puzzle, it's we provide hope. So you're learning these skills. Now let's put them into practice in experiential learning. I want to talk about this. So I did a project with Jeff, so Dr. Landine from UMB. And we did this assessment tool with high school students. Normally the ESAT tool will be used with, folks that are in the community and just trying to navigate the world of work and they've had a difficult time. It'll be a counseling tool. And so it was interesting because you see the plot there. And so we had the students fill out their own self-assessment, and it plotted how they saw themselves. And then we sent them to work. And then we did this again, the self-assessment, but we also took in the employer's assessment, their teacher's assessments. We had all these different plots to help create this data. And we saw the self-assessment and the assessment from the employers and the students, like we saw that they were apart and they weren't touching each other. And then by the end, we actually saw they crossed over. So all of a sudden, a student who was rating themselves in the green, which is like excellent, they've moved themselves into yellow after being at work and having a great experience, but they end up being harder on themselves and like probably more realistic, whereas the people around them are providing them, great feedback. And so it was really interesting to watch these young people who struggled with just figuring out what they even want to do for careers or pathways, and through that process they transformed. It was very interesting to observe, but it showed the power of experiential learning, especially when we had that data piece and the resilience. And like having a young person that went through this and meeting them on the street out at Harvest Jazz and Blues, and they came out and they're like, "Oh, Mr. Culberson, like how you doing? And guess what I'm doing now for work? And you know why? Because of the project that we went through." And so how cool was that you see the hope and you hear the hope. So employable people possess a collection of individual attributes necessary for effective adaptation. That's the resilience piece. Career identities cognitively cohere these elements while providing energy and direction to their influence. So it's like it's a culmination. So we have the SEL, we have the global competencies, we have experiences, which are going to help us. I'm not going to play the video again, but LMI. So, okay, so I've got experiences, and now I want to be in New Brunswick or Prince Edward Island or Quebec or Newfoundland or Nova Scotia or Ontario. What are the job prospects? What are the career prospects like in that pathway that I'm choosing? And so if I can have a sense of what that looks like, then that's going to help me make informed decisions. And if I can be making informed decisions, I'm going to have a sense of hope. Like I'm going to have a good feeling when I have a direction that is clearly outlined, and I'm making a plan that's connected to something. I'm not just going to like wander and see. Sometimes it takes that, but I mean, and that's fine. But when I can understand how to access and use labor market information, then it can really alleviate a lot of those unknowns. The other piece that the young people need and they actually really want is more understanding of that financial piece. Like how do I buy a house? How do I buy a car? How much money do I need to make to survive or to live or to climb out of the space that my family has been in? What do I need? And so the financial literacy piece can really help provide a level of hope and an understanding. And what it is, it's about it's about creating a pathway that we're comfortable with. So all of this we're recommending, like, don't just do things, because if we're just doing things, or we're just taking this information without that transformational piece, and the reflection, then they end up just being experiences. So things become more powerful when we have opportunity to reflect, when we have an opportunity to share and express the things that have been happening in our lives and what we've been learning. That's the relational piece. All learning is relational. And so using a tool like myBlueprint, and there are other tools out there that you're able to actually share things and record things and keep it. And so this is what we recommend, that you use the tool, something, to keep track of those experiences and learning and document them. So all of this ultimately helps us learn how to cope. One can cope, the perception of one can cope with important current and future demands. So that's hope. So as people that care about promoting mental health, helping people understand that they can cope now and they can cope in the future by actually engaging in good career development and actually finding purpose through that. And I get it. I mean, the average person in Canada right now is going to change jobs 15 times before they're done working. The average person is going to change career paths 3 times, like completely different pivots, and that's okay. That's all part of that career development process. But the skills that allow us to do that, the experiences that allow us to do that, the understanding of the labor market, the financial piece, allow us to do that. And so all of this is actually, it's all nicely connected with our sustainable development goals and global goals. Because we're talking about many aspects here, and leveling a playing field when we're all invested in promoting positive mental health and good career development, so that you not only feel good about yourself because you're on a pathway or a track that you feel good about, you resonates with you, but also working towards that financial independence and a contributing member of society. So it's all connected. And we're just gonna kind of skip over here. So one of the pieces, like, what can we do in our places of work? I'm going to give you something. We're gonna have a brief discussion as well. But what we can do is focus on the relationships around us. We can take time for each other, using visual reminders of positive, normalized understanding of mental health, and not confusing that with mental illness. Expanding our knowledge and understanding of mental illness and mental health and destigmatization is also, it's part of that. Validating and normalizing experiences and feelings, and treating students, but also whoever we work with, as whole people. So not just looking at people because of something they may be struggling with. And that's something that we need to do as individuals. So what's next? So this is the discussion part. I'm gonna keep sharing, but if you want to open your video pane to like the 3x3 to see people, actually maybe I'll stop sharing so that we can all see each other, because I'd rather have that as a focal point, not a PowerPoint. if you want to kind of do like the larger screen, and we'll just take a few minutes just to discuss a few things. So things that we can potentially do in our places of work. If you feel comfortable with video, great, and if not, that's okay too. And we'll open the floor. So I guess the first question that I would ask, and I'll post it in the side here. What is your organization doing to promote positive mental health? Now, so it's in the side there. So what is your organization doing to promote positive mental health, and how can they do better? So I just open the floor. It's nice to see faces.
Hi, I will say that one of the things that our organization did, I'm from Canadian Families and Corrections Network, so we work with children and families who have someone incarcerated.
Yep.
We try to do a lot of things around COVID, and really our first response was to try to get accurate information about the prisons out there, because there was a lot of misinformation, and so we try to help people calm down with that. But when the whole, the point that I want to say, when the George Floyd died and we had a lot of protests and racism issues, this created a problem too.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we did in our organization was all the board and the staff got together and we talked about it as a cohesive unit, and the staff actually told the board where they saw issues of racism and trouble inside their institutions in their own jobs, because everybody works inside the prisons. And that was really good because it brought an open and honest discussion about a really hard topic that everyone is struggling with right now, along with COVID. And so I think the answer there is positive mental health is strongly connected to a communication stream.
Yeah, communication is huge. You're right. Anybody else want to share what's happening in your organization?
Hi, it's Anita.
Hey, Anita.
Hi. I work in an Indigenous health center, and we have a wonderful initiative that we just started. It's a Mi'kmaq word that means let's work together, Maui Lagudinej mental health services. So we are working on the ground every day, a clinician team of 3 clinicians, myself on the missing and murdered Indigenous women file, and a lot of other, we're touching base with our communities on the ground, working with individuals that are experiencing traumatic events. Just today, sad to say, a young man from one of our local First Nations, I believe, was murdered, and there has been some other trauma that has been quite, it hit the news with the Rodney Levi case and the Chantal Moore, where the police had come in and took the lives of these individuals who were really in need of mental health counseling and services. And in one case, the police went to do a wellness check and ended up in this young woman's death. So we're doing a lot of work trying to address things like this happening in our communities and engaging the police, trying to see policy changes at a higher level so that our leadership in our community and service providers such as myself are consulted in the best way to really intervene, the best way to de-escalate, who are these people that are coming into communities, what sort of racist or discriminatory beliefs do they have about Indigenous people, why are lives being taken. And I'm Mi'kmaq myself. I'm from the Mi'kmaq community just outside of Grand Machief, and we've lived this basically our whole life, and now we're making some progress with talking about the systemic racism, all of the factors that contributed to unhealthy behaviors and mental illness in our communities, the Indian residential school system, the 60 schools where children were taken out of our homes. There's been, all sorts of documentation, very little changes on the ground. So this is really frustrating. We're resilient people. We've been here despite all of this for centuries, and we will continue. So with that resiliency, we're looking for homegrown solutions, working with our partners, stakeholders, clinicians. There's such a big group, but I hope in my lifetime that I'll see a more positive change in our communities. A lot of this is based on the systemic racism and the sexual abuse and all the trauma that took place that against our people. So it's not an easy thing to tease apart. It's not there's no easy solution. But we know that these solutions have to be designed by our people in consultation with those that can help. So our allies, I call them. So yeah, I could go on and on, but just wanted to put that out there because some of us are really we're tapped out with the type of services that we need to provide at the First Nation level, and it's a big problem.
Yeah, no, and it is. I mean, that's it, and it can be exhausting, right? And so it's looking for those possible things that do provide hope. And I mean, you even said it. Like you've got that hope, and that's what helps drive us, right? That piece. But then it's like helping others find that too.
Exactly.
And then moving things, which is nice to hear that that's starting to happen. Yeah. Anybody else? I have a few more questions. I don't want to cut anybody off if you wanted to share something, because that can help. Hearing what others are doing can help us frame what's going on in our place.
Just going back to Anita, is that right? It's quite difficult to introduce new programs and policies to First Nation communities because each community is different, especially with like how far the history goes back. For example, here in Eskazoni, a lot of the older population, they have a really, I don't know how to say this any other way, but closed-minded view of everything. Like if you try to explain your problems right away, they try to shut you down, and they're like, well, I had it worse. You didn't have the childhood that I had. And I think that in order to introduce new programs to each community, there needs to be a whole study before, during, and after, because it's really complicated.
And an openness too. I mean, that's part of what you're talking about, Alyssa. Is it Alicia? Alyssa.
It's Alicia.
Alicia. Okay. Just want to make sure. So Alicia, like, and it is like and we have, I mean, around us, and that whether it's First Nation communities or if it's schools or if it's places of work, we have closed spaces where people interact, where they're not so open to change, they're not so open to talking about things, and we have open places, and there can be healthier versions of both of those as well, whether they're closed or open. But part of the goal is to be a healthy open, right? Like, let's talk about change and how we can make that happen together. And some people need that, like, that why, like, why is this important? But it can be a challenge sometimes, especially when folks are if they're kind of set in their ways, or if they're not comfortable. So a lot of people aren't comfortable with change. Our reality is, I mean, even through all of COVID, we are like we have to change. We can't keep doing things the same way we've been doing them. because everything just looks so different. All right, I've got another question here for you. So what should promoting positive mental health look like? So like 5 years from now, 2025, 2026, like what should it look like? How should it or should it look different? What do we need to be doing? So if you just think about that, and then I'd like to open the floor.
Andrew,
Yeah.
something that an area that I've focused my career on has been working with Indigenous youth who are who have limited or poor direction on what to do in that career pathing, how to navigate that whole idea of careers and how to choose what you're best suited at as.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a really good resource called Guiding Circles. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I haven't heard of
It
that
was
one.
written by a couple of Indigenous educators, and it takes the framework of the medicine wheel, if you will, and then the 4 quadrants of the self being the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspect of who we all are.
Yep.
What I do with youth when I facilitate this is that we really talk about, what that means to us as individuals, and how can we become more balanced in each of those areas of ourselves. And Indigenous youth make a very, they easily connect with that. So we talk about that and a lot of the stuff that you were mentioning in your graphics, I got it because, again, none of this is new really. The idea of, us being in the center of our life or our existence, and then coming out from that are these influences, whether in Indigenous perspective might be family, then community, then culture, then the natural world, and then the spiritual world. So, we really talk all about this so that, and as we do, I see the youth making connections. I see them understanding and placing themselves sort of in this big, this big world and getting it. And it's been really fulfilling for me as an educator to work with students with this. I've not only worked with youth, but also adults who are experiencing career and life changes and who are also lost or not sure or they're meandering, navigating, they're not real sure. So it really does bring some perspective and some clarity to what that process looks like for careers and jobs, and then how your culture or yourself, and I think we can all as individuals, whether we're Indigenous or not, identify with that those areas of the self. So I think that's been really effective. I've taught it all around New Brunswick, certainly in communities, and a bit in Nova Scotia, and so just putting that out there for people that are possibly looking for additional resources. And I want to say hi to Alyssa, just my fellow Mi'kmaq. I see her, and I do it.
I think that's wonderful, and it's working with. I mean, you didn't create the medicine wheel, which, I mean, if you look at a current wellness wheel, because I did a lot of research around that a number of years ago when I was at Fredericton High School, and we were doing like a positive mental health kind of blitz. And I mean, the wellness wheel, it's totally based off the medicine wheel, and it's just, and if it connects and it works, I mean, Anita,
Yeah.
that's amazing too.
So if we can work on aspects of our spiritual well-being,
Yep.
or work
Yep.
on aspects of our physical wellness, whether it's nutrition, smoking, alcohol, all of this contributes to positive mental health.
Yep.
And to bring it all together and say,
Yep.
let's, and then I always put them through an exercise after I show them what my medicine wheel looked like when I undertook my master's in adult ed. I went right bonkers, right? Because I got this overload of mental and practicing nothing spiritually, gained 30 pounds during the process, and was really off balance and unwell, and then,
like a flat tire.
so
Right?
there's this, so they have this visual
Yeah.
representation that makes sense. So they have to draw their own where they are right now.
Yes.
And then they do that, and then we flip the page and we say, okay, so how are we going to get this more in balance for ourselves? What
That's
are
right.
the things we need to focus on? And you do it, and it's just like, bam, it's right there. Like, again, it's just bringing it together and presenting it in a way that relates or is easy for us to visualize. And a lot of us are visual people, so we need to see this, not just talk about it in theory and sort of, all out there. But anyway, I won't say any more because I think it's a great tool.
But what you're talking, and this is what I was trying to communicate, even through the presentation, that in all of these things we're doing, it's about like stopping, taking time and taking time to reflect and have conversations. So like that relationship piece and the reflection piece, and often we miss that, or we get busy, we're distracted, right? Like, and so if we can help people get to that point, they are going to understand themselves better and the world around them better and how they fit. So, and a big piece of this too, like right now, like a focus on resiliency, like can you imagine if through the Atlantic provinces, we had a renewed focus on developing resiliency through all of COVID and through all of, Black Lives Matter, through all of this, right? And so it's not just those things happen, but it's the transformational piece. What are we going to do with it, right? How do I as an individual, because I have an impact on people around me, how do I widen that sphere of influence, because I have an impact. It might not be huge, but I have an impact. Or maybe I have a position where I can, right, impact more. But so it's all a journey too. It really is. But I think was it Christine or Anita? I forget who, but with communication, like we need to be more cohesive in what we're talking about. We need to be using common language. We need to make sure people understand what we're talking about when we're talking about positive mental health. We're not talking about eradicating mental illness, right? We're talking about people flourishing and being in a space where they can do well. They can be well, and they can do well. That makes sense. Well, listen, folks, I just in respectful of the time, it's 3:45. We went 15 over. Everything's kind of gone over today, and that's fine. But I think we will wrap things up. And I think one of the things that if we can walk away with is what, if you can think about it, what can I do in my place of work when I return later this week? What can I start with? And it doesn't have to be anything big, but we all have a role in promoting positive mental health. We can all have an impact on those around us. So I want to thank you, everybody, for navigating the challenges of technology this morning, this afternoon. And I appreciate your time and sharing and listening. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Just as a quick final question there, would you
Yes,
be
Michael.
accessible through Whova for follow-up questions, like later on today?
Yeah. I'll check in, and I'll be doing the session again tomorrow as well.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, appreciate that. Thanks for the talk.
Okay, no problem.